Joseph Oliver. He's a visionary and the leader in AI and sustainability. He has helped major organizations like Mercedes-Benz and Baidu embrace sustainable AI-driven innovations and strategies. He will be talking about the future of AI and sustainability, transforming businesses for a greener world. Joseph is, he's in a way everywhere in international development, and wherever we think about innovation and making the world a better place through sustainability and governance. He will always be involved in this kind of discussions. I admire him very much, and thank you for staying up so late to be here with us. Yeah, let's talk about the future of AI and sustainability.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you for everyone. I'm going to present a little slide deck, so I hope this works. Does everyone see this? It's yes, very long title, so I'll skip that pretty quick. I need to note. Sorry, 1 second. And, yeah. That should work, hopefully. Can you all see the long title slide?
It looks good for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is a huge topic, right? So I'm going to give you like a sort of very top overview. Most importantly, I'm going to say what's happening sort of now, it's current, and then some of the vision for what's coming in the future that I find exciting. In particular, I find that this is a topic that's sort of both hopeful and it's also very urgent. How does artificial intelligence embrace sustainability in business? And in a lot of ways without sacrificing profitability. And also how will it actually shape the very fundamentals of business itself? So I think we're all in agreement that sustainability is no longer optional. Climate change, resource depletion, things like bioplastics and waste management are pressing issues. AI is actually creating a critical role in addressing these issues. It allows businesses to track carbon footprints, predict energy needs, and optimize resources. And it can do that in real time. So for instance, AI-driven smart grids are allowed to or can balance energy loads much more efficiently than traditionally. And that reduces waste and reliance on non-renewable sources to give us sort of top line. One of the clearest applications of AI is obviously in energy efficiency. So the very well-known case study is to do with Google's DeepMind. So they optimize their data center energy use using AI. DeepMind being the AI arm of Google, to be honest. So they worked to do the whole of the optimization for Google. It was very successful. And they basically create a system which forecast demand and adjusted the energy flows in real time. That minimized the waste and it balanced the renewable energy sources with more traditional power for them, which allowed them to basically reduce their carbon footprint significantly. Other areas that we're seeing quite a lot of gains would be in manufacturing and agricultural management, both of which are giant industries. I think manufacturing is going to be forecast to be in the next 5 to 10 years, an 8.8 trillion industry, which is digitizing incredibly fast. One of the most exciting aspects also about AI is its accessibility. So about a decade ago, I was responsible for managing a giant AI program for Mercedes-Benz. which was really only possible because of their resources and the amount of money that they could spend on it, training neural networks, building data spines, data lakes, and significant training, 20,000 people. These days, however, businesses of all sizes can access AI, and they can use it for driving their sustainability measurements. And so the development of things like generative low code, no code, generative AI has really made a huge difference here. When we really think about the potential, it's also important to think beyond incremental improvements, and talk about how we're transforming entire industries. Its ability to process vast amounts of data, identify pattern recognition, and also to make real-time decisions allow for AI and machine learning basically as an ideal tool for large-scale environmental change. Example would be using it within urban cities. I was working on the environmental strategy and economic strategy of London. It was a 15-year projection, and we really didn't have very much information other than things that, for instance, like the Transport for London were able to give us. Nowadays, you can literally manage the urban infrastructure itself, so you can reduce energy consumption and waste management. Cities like Singapore have integrated AI systems directly. In Singapore, they use it to optimize traffic flow. So they reduce the congestion and they lower their emissions because of that, especially in terms of cars that are just sort of waiting in traffic. Similarly, these sort of AI-powered or AI-enabled sensors in public transport systems are able to monitor energy use and adjust in real time. So it makes much more efficient urban living. One of the biggest sort of misconceptions is that sustainability and profitability have been at odds. And this is, I would say, reminiscent, harking back almost 20 years to where there was a sort of transition from the deep green movement into everyday consumerism, awareness of everyday environmentalism, at least. So predictive maintenance systems are, for instance, reducing machine breakdowns, reducing energy consumption. Another example from that would be Siemens. They use AI-powered systems across their factories, and that predicts machine failures. I think the reduction in downtime was 30%. So you can imagine that's a vast value, increasing their profitability significantly, and it cut their energy usage by 10%. So it's not just operational costs, but it also allowed them to put that into their annual report on their sustainability goals, which is pretty significant. Another area is obviously supply chain optimization. So being able to predict demand more accurately, or reducing things like overproduction, which is in effect waste. Example of that would be Walmart. So they use AI to manage their inventory and optimize delivery. 7-Eleven uses it as well, but Walmart specifically used it for their logistics chain. And I think that saved around 100 million miles of van driving per year. So there was a lot of fuel consumption emissions that they also cut there. So cost savings, small environmental footprint again.
One moment, Joseph. Did you mean to also go through the slides or not any longer? Because we only see the title on this.
Yeah, so each slide has a title, right?
We've only seen we're only seeing the first page. We haven't seen the slides that you've been talking about. We've heard you, but the slides were not moving on our screen.
Oh, really? Well, you can only see the black and white one.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. I have had slides the entire time. So yeah, I did mean to do that.
I had a
wonder how
feeling.
let's see if we can try this again. Does this work?
Let's try to move. Yes, now we can see the slides.
Okay. Okay, big faux pas. But here's the interesting bit. That was the sort of precursor, which, standard. It's me just giving some corporate and government examples. This is the current stuff. So you've got AI as enabler, empowering business, I agree to planet, profitability and sustainability. All these images were made using AI, might I add. But this is where it gets interesting. So thank you for pointing that out. Now I'll illustrate the interesting aspect, which is how business is going to get reshaped. So this is where I think we're sort of very we have a lot to think about. So intriguingly, AI has the core potential to reshape our structure of capitalism and consumerism. Not just business, but the very underlying structure of the business itself. Moving us away from things like traditional growth-centric, resource extractive and models towards a system which can prioritize things like degrowth, regeneration, and harmony within the ecosystem. And so this is how I want to show you some of the potential that will be coming. Okay, so one of the key things is basically being able to automate abundance and thus reduce scarcity. One of the key drivers of our system in capitalism is scarcity. It's measured against value, effectively. It's not a great system for humanity. That's a whole other story, but there are other models out there. Basically, goods and services are only valuable because they're limited. And AI, in particular in the realms of energy production, resource management, it can create conditions where actually many forms of scarcity are reduced or actually eliminated. Example would be AI optimized renewable energy systems, which could create abundant clean energy, significantly reduce the cost of power, and make it a widely available resource, especially with things like decentralized smart grids. With AI managing it, as opposed to, let's say, profit centers, we could achieve sort of a near zero waste energy distribution. And that would reduce the need, obviously, for resource extraction and thus fossil fuels. In manufacturing, for instance, AI-powered automation could produce goods more efficiently with much fewer resources. I think the estimated waste is around 40% at this moment. In such a system, the value of material goods themselves will decrease because the cost of production would fall dramatically. Now, there's a lot to be said that when something becomes more efficient, consumption increases. I'll get to that in a bit, but effectively, this could also mark a leading shift away from constant consumption and towards more sustainable production methods. Whilst it reduces these costs of things like energy and transportation and manufacturing, the capitalistic driver of competition over scarce resources will diminish, and the focus can actually shift ideologically around sustainability and collective well-being. So there are some parts of the world and some governments which are already living with this as core theses towards how they want to manage their people. It could also help very much in terms of transitioning to a circular economy. So, AI will play a central role in that. Where you find waste being eliminated, materials being constantly reused, it's a fundamental departure from the linear take, make, and dispose, or throwaway culture, also known as. So that model of capitalism, which really thrives on consumption and then disposal, driving growth, actually becomes irrelevant. So in a circular economy, products could be designed to be repaired, reused, or modular, and also recycled, optimizing each step of those processes. In fact, you can start to use an intelligent system to build off the back of previous models in order to enhance them, but without actually changing the components and so forth. So this would include longer lifespans and basically reduce the need for new production. That would allow us to manage and track materials throughout the entire life cycle. And it would ensure things aren't wasted. Products can be easily disassembled and repurposed. A lot of waste is actually recoverable. And in some cases, people are now making money out of digging back up landfill to recover certain components. However, it's not even close to what our waste consumption is going on. So, in that sort of scenario, economic value isn't driven by constant new consumption, but by extending the value and the life of resources and thus minimizing waste. AI can create inefficiencies here that make this a circular system actually scalable, as opposed to what we've seen so far, which is cottage industry and not really connected. And that basically creates a foundation for an economy that regenerates rather than depletes. AI can support degrowth through optimized resource allocation. So degrowth is an interesting concept. It is actually the state of where we're at now with sustainability. We need to reduce our growth, not sustain it. So, degrowth as a theory is advocating for reducing the size of economies and consumption levels, especially in wealthier countries, places like Australia and pretty much the whole Western world. So shifting the focus from GDP to improving quality of life and ecological balance. I studied with the Bhutanese government on GNH, and they have 72 different indicators on how to measure happiness across the population. GDP is a terrible way to measure whether or not we're actually having a good time. So we need to decouple that. By using AI to basically enable this paradigm, we can use resources in a way which is prioritizing sustainability and well-being over growth. The optimization could ensure that basic needs are basically distributed correctly with a minimal environmental footprint. So food systems, farm to table, allowing that we only eat what we need or produce what we need, allocate things like water and energy with precision, which would reduce overconsumption and inefficiency. I know that the California government right now is renewing their water rights along the Colorado River. 1% of the Colorado River reaches its end destination. The rest of it is used mainly in agriculture in California. And they're having to use smart data enabled with AI to make those decisions because, frankly, the growth is unsustainable. It's going to lead to a complete collapse of not only the river ecosystem, which is already pretty much gone, but then all the people, families, economy that relies on that, including all the food systems. So when you have a degrowth model, rather than competing again, it allows us to do more with less, use the resources smartly and efficiently, and allows for a high standard of living without the environmental degradation that's associated with unchecked growth. So it doesn't mean that we have to go back into Luddite world or reduce our quality of life. It means we can sustain that, but whilst also being in balance. AI can also enable post-work societies. This is quite a radical concept, and it has some proponents who are very behind it, and a lot of people who are saying, no, I'm not sure about this. But effectively, it can support the emergence of post-work societies. As tasks are automated, whether it be through robotic manufacturing or logistics or autonomous decision-making, the need for human labor in many sectors will decline. This will initially be done out of profit, but it's going to, and this is unstoppable, but it should at least create the opportunity for creating a different type of society. So this will break that link, capitalistic link between labor and value creation, right? Which is like the fundamental, I think, Keynesian economics of the whole thing. In a post-work society, AI may actually enable things like universal basic income or other social safety nets, allow people to shift away from work-driven livelihoods or time for human life, and it frees up the human potential for things that are creative, fulfilling, and more environmentally regenerative. So people could actually dedicate themselves to things that don't rely on endless consumption, such as environmental stewardship, community building, or even education. In such a society, wealth wouldn't be measured by capital accumulation, but by ecological and social well-being. What you also find is that when people have a certain amount of money, and this is all the thing about Maslow, is that you actually get that anyway. So people realize that money doesn't bring them satisfaction. So this could enable many more people to do that. Regenerative economies and ecological rejuvenation. So the heart of the shift towards a regenerative economy, the focus is not only on reducing harm, but actively restoring and renewing the ecosystem within which we rely on. So AI can help balance human activity with the needs of that natural world. There's several ways to do this, which frankly now are critical. One would be managing natural resources. So monitoring ecosystems in real time, tracking biodiversity, water quality, soil health, and deforestation levels. Last week, I was talking to the largest biodiversity data collector in the world, which comes out of Japan. And they're looking at how they can use all this data to basically allow modeling for people to regenerate biodiverse species and also zones. You use drones to plant trees, you could restore wetlands, you could monitor wildlife populations and ensure things like ecosystems not only are restored, but they start to thrive. Funnily enough, they do when people leave them alone, as we've seen in this, for instance, the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea, which is one of the most abundant biodiversity and species-rich areas in the world, because no one's allowed them. So next one is also what can happen here is enforcing what's called planetary boundaries. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the donut concept, but there's basically a limit to which we can grow. So this would allow basically governments, organizations to use data to ensure that human activity actually remains within the planetary boundaries. and the ecological limits between beyond which life support systems for the Earth are not compromised. You could do that through tracking emissions, monitoring deforestation, and again, managing resource extraction in a way that guarantees we don't exceed those boundaries, as in there is a limit to growth, which is obviously the fundamental name of the Club of Rome's original thesis in the 1970s. So in a regenerative economy, AI could basically help us live in harmony with nature by constantly assessing the health of the different ecosystems and then guiding our actions towards basically contributing to the renewal rather than the depletion through activity. Here's another one, is that effectively we move from ownership to access, and what people might know as a sharing economy or the local economic trading schemes. So AI can accelerate the shift from ownership-based capitalism to something that is access-based economies where goods and services are shared rather than owned. No one needs their lawnmower that much. You might need it once a month if you're really enthusiastic, right? So you bought this machine, but you're only using it one of 30 days. So actually that machine could be shared across 30 households. So AI platforms effectively can manage the networks of shared resources automatically and pretty efficiently. So transport, housing, consumer goods, allowing you to access things what you need and when you need it, but without the sort of environmental cost of mass production. Example would be sharing and optimizing the use of vehicles within the city. So reducing the need for every house to own a car. We've seen that, in the last 15 years go across the world in terms of like car sharing schemes, but it's not automatic and it's not like press a button, you have access to it. So we're getting there. It can manage shared housing spaces, energy resources, and things like communal goods, which in the end actually consumes far fewer resources than we need. It's funny because, for instance, in America, I think something like most people basically use their garage for storage as opposed for the cars because there's so much stuff. And then a lot of households in America, they actually have other storage containers that they've filled up with things that they never use. So it's like, we don't use these things anyway. This is the sort of less is more approach, and it would significantly reduce consumption, increase efficiency, convenience, and it would also move away from that capitalistic focus of individual ownership towards collective resource management, of which we're all subject to. So, I think that in essence, AI is playing a transformative role in making businesses more sustainable already, and it is enhancing profitability. However, with the right leadership, it could shape our collective future for the better. So, as you think about it today, I sort of encourage you to think about how AI could actually be leveraged in your own field, how it could help your organization reduce waste, cut energy use, and innovate towards a more sustainable future. The opportunities are vast, the technology is already here, so there's really no excuse other than to act now. In conclusion, AI has the power to redefine the very foundation of capitalism by eliminating scarcity, decoupling economic value from consumption, and enabling a world where degrowth leads to greater well-being and harmony with the planet. We can't have a future all based on endless growth, but we can have it based on smart and sustainable regeneration. Prosperity being measured by ecological balance, resource equity, and the flourishing of both humans and the natural world. So thank you very much for listening to this, and hopefully we can now open the floor to some questions.
Thank you so much, Joseph. This was beautiful, and I'm definitely a big fan of your vision and optimism. I'm personally, in the same line of thinking or mentality. I believe that this is a great resource. The AI is a great resource in almost probably all aspects of life, or most aspects of life, and how we govern society, that can be used to really transform the world. Especially the things that are not going so well and are destroying our livelihoods and environments. Can you talk a little bit about well, actually, I would ask a more general question. How did you do your research in all these aspects of AI? How did you get to your vision? Because you clearly thought about different layers of society and different layers of our livelihoods and society. And how did you get into these questions and the kind of vision that you're sharing?
This has been a bit of a journey. I did some of the first ever funding for a local economic trading scheme. So it was a situation where people could literally share their gardening tools. So I helped fund that. A big check, literally a physically big check. That's something about 15 years ago. I've been fascinated with the fact that, if you really just look at the system, it doesn't work. And so like, why is there no alternative? And most people going, well, it's either socialism or communism, capitalism. I think it's all sort of very ignorant behavior. There's quite obviously a limit to our boundaries. There's a limit to the resources, and the throughput which we're extracting resources through is way beyond that can be sustained by the ecosystem. So I think about 14 years ago, I wrote, sustainable lifestyles thesis around ethical consumption, and then it was used as also to influence the UN Sustainable Lifestyles report, which was the first time that had been mentioned in the wild by the intergovernment thing. So I've just been in this for a long time, and it just sort of like business as usual just doesn't make any sense. Now, when I ended up working in also in technology and innovation fields and how to invent new things, it opened up a space for me which said, okay, well, there are assets, tools, and mechanisms which can be deployed to solve these problems. And they can be done based on scientific data and logic and reason, as opposed to sort of emotion and fear. And I think that's where some of this comes in very effectively, is that I just don't see how much of this is, you can't reason against it, other than if you actually had some money that might be at stake in a company that was going to go bust. I just feel like this is an antithesis to the vested interests that we find ourselves in. And that's why I find it so compelling and so interesting. And then I've had the opportunity to work on these things globally and with large organizations, and at the cutting edge of some of the investments that they've made. And I've seen like the potential, at least modeled in lots of different pilot schemes. And so like that could be rolled out and adopted by many types of people for collective benefit.
That's very interesting. And you also contributed to, or you designed the happiness index of Bhutan. Is that?
No, it's been going since 1972. I think I was in the first 10 people ever to be trained in gross national happiness by the Bhutanese government. So I was one of the first ever sort of external, out of the kingdom. Bhutan was very close. It was first people to ever be trained in the methodology. They have 72 different indicators, which is basically a form of new metrics. New metrics as a movement I find fascinating, and there's organizations like the New Economics Foundation, which have been doing this for almost 20 years publicly and accessibly. So it's just a way to like measure things that aren't just about the weight of the steel of the car, or what GDP just doesn't make any sense. Like I don't know. We don't have to go into that. I think it's pretty obvious.
That AI will help create a better life, maybe a better values and standards for us to be living our lives. So in your vision, we could achieve a life where we could pursue more human activities, like maybe art or sustainability, or taking care of the environment and the community, as opposed to working for endless consumption.
Yeah. And I think that what I've attempted to do is give some pretty tangible, hard-nosed, irrefutable examples. But then there's a lot of other things which are very interesting. Things like, well, how does this change the psychology of people? Why are people super unhappy and their well-being's been dropping since the 50s? And how have we got into a situation where there's such an epidemic of mental health issues and all this stuff? And AI can also help that. I think that the main thing to remember with all this sustainability and all this technology stuff is that there's no silver bullet. And actually, the first place to start is within yourself. And you can't externalize these problems. So you have to deal with all that shadow stuff and all the conditioning that we've been given, especially from things like advertising over the years that we've existed on this planet, and we've been manipulated. So you have to let a lot of that drop in order to sort of see, okay, well, what could be a different paradigm that would make us actually more happy, more connected, and you know, and reduce things like, yeah, a lot of the mental health issues, which are really based on lack of connection, you know, and that's to do with the adherence on material value, right? So there's a lot more that's sort of intangible. It's difficult. It's difficult to convey that in a irrefutable way, because everyone will have their opinion. But I think that's the part where you have to go home and do a bit some personal thought on what makes you feel connected. And most people in the end, it's service and what being in nature, right? So why not do more of that? Why can't we create society to do more of that? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I will just ask our audience if they have any questions, because we know it's very late for you, and I don't want to keep you for too long. So if anybody else has questions, now is the time.
This is less of a question, more like a comment as well, because we're singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to post-work societies, and I'm really fortunate to come from Scotland, where we're on paper a well-being economy nation, but we were making these like quite progressive steps towards a well-being economy in the kind of a similar or our own version of what Bhutan has in terms of measuring well-being and happiness. And just at the last minute, you know, because we're in a cost of living crisis, our government just decided to prioritise GDP and growth, and so it is deeply structural, and so I mean, I agree about it starts within, but also recognising the structural elements of it.
I mean, the challenge of Scotland's predicament. My mum's Scottish, by the way, so I'm half Scottish, right?
Nice.
And half my family from Scotland. The challenge there, and I've worked with the Scottish government for years, directly, is that when you say your government, you have two governments. One of them is set in London.
Gentlemen, our next station stop in just a few minutes will be Penn Station, Newark, New Jersey.
And so one of them is based in London, one of them is based in Scotland, and you know, the UK government, frankly, has been pretty, I would say, asleep at the wheel in terms of a lot of this stuff for the last like 3 terms, or I don't know, 6 terms, because they kept failing, quitting. But so you've been subject to that, you know. The other thing is that Scotland has a deficit of nearly 5 billion a year that is being paid by the UK government. So it's not completely self-sufficient, and it is reliant on the changes in London, which, you know, it's not able to influence. So there is a challenge there, whereby it's a great case study to understand how, you know, local innovation can really go a long way, but we're all into a global interconnected society, and if we just look at our back garden, it's not going to work, right? So it does require UK government to get their fingers out of their places I won't mention at the same time, and so that's working together, right?
Yeah, thanks for your insights into that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other question? If not, I will ask you another question. So, according to you, in your view, what are the steps, some concrete steps that society and us as citizens would have to make in order to achieve a more sustainable future with AI? How do we need to cooperate? What kind of agreements do we have to make? And you know, what if you were to give us a couple of guidelines on how to act rapidly in order to achieve a more sustainable future, maybe a better shared economy, and so on? Where should we start? What should we start doing?
A good question. Yeah, I was asked this around sustainable investments as well, and my view has changed on this over the years. I'm now very fundamentally from the view you need to pick up a mirror and look at yourself, basically, and be like, what could you be proud of, given the situation that's occurring globally in terms of the effect on the planet that people have in the wars, the behavior that people have in the lack of kindness in a lot of, especially in the places like the UK media. There's just it's just designed to hate on people, and that's because it makes more money for the owners. So there's this huge centralization of wealth, which has been manipulated for local populations in order to feather the pockets of people in power, and that is only getting more and more extreme. The term, I think, is Gini coefficients, the gap between the haves and the have not. So this is driving, the biggest disparity in wealth since, I think, the Middle Ages, right? And so we're in a situation whereby change fundamentally has to be from not just local action, but actual real reform. It's not enough to be demoing and protesting. I believe in those things, but I think it's also like we have to fundamentally change the way that we behave and understand how that participates and catalyzes in society. So I think, first thing is educate yourself on the things that you believe in. Don't take first layer, go much deeper. Follow the money would always be the best way to put it. Like basically every single environmental policy that's been restricted or blamed or thing is come from vested interests of people who are making a lot of money right now and don't want to stop making money at the detriment to everyone else. So, at the same time, you've got to say, well, what do I love? What's the thing that drives my heart? And if that's the people you love and the nature around you and the things that you like doing, then do them and do them consciously and say, like, this is stuff that I want to protect, not just now, but for future generations, So that's like how to get that motivation going.
Yeah, and I think that obviously applies to everybody, and it would be a great, this would be the best values to live by, no matter where you are and what function you're in. And what would be if we were to design a message for the people who are currently greedy and hoarding wealth and destroying the planet by doing so? What would we tell them, especially now that there are new AI tools that could be used to maybe create a better, more equal society?
Yeah, I think we need to start seeing it as a mental illness. It just doesn't make sense. I saw this funny meme, which was like, if a monkey collected more bananas than it could eat, like, we'd be like, that monkey's odd. Like, why is that monkey doing that? We'd study it and be like, something's wrong with it, right? And actually in society now, we're going, yeah, have as many bananas as you can. Like, piles of, wow, this person has 1 billion bananas. That's amazing. Like, that's literally the mentality right now, is endorsing completely destructive mental health issue, which is to do with believing that the value sits in accumulation like a dragon, right? Like literally just sitting on wealth. And it doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense in the context of neoliberal capitalism. But that's not a in harmony system that we've adopted. So it's almost like, well, you're playing the game of Monopoly and everyone gets frustrated and annoyed except for the person who wins. Monopoly is a great sort of metaphor for our existence, but reality is it doesn't make anyone happy, and it doesn't make the family happy after playing it. Everyone sort of hates each other and doesn't want to talk to people. So is that what we want to live in? Do we want to live in the big game of Monopoly? I don't.
Yeah, my hope is that the say 1%ers are starting to invest in, to do more impact investing, maybe, to realize that by moving resources that they're currently sitting on, they might be able to really transform the world, and it might be really efficient, especially now that we have AI tools. So I'm still an optimist. I might even be even more optimistic than you, but somewhat deep down, I feel that we can, we eventually have to speak with everybody, and for to send a message to everybody that can actually contribute, transform our mentality. Global society.
So I co-authored a book called Conscious Investing, and it's slightly different from impact investing. As in conscious investing, you actually have to identify what your value system is first, and that value system has to be reflected out into your portfolio and your investments. So it's not just about, hey, that thing is green and it makes me money. It's actually like, hold on, question the value of money to you, right? So That's one differentiation here. I think that I am optimistic. Many people aren't. I believe that, frankly, there is no other pathway other than to be optimistic, because we're facing such a massive challenge. And, you know, I can't imagine going on a horrible, long, rainy hike in the middle of a storm with someone who's complaining all the time. Oh no.
Yeah.
You know, so if we take that view, like, what kind of person do you want to show up as well, right? So that's how we can motivate people to get through some of this and to make the world better.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.